I heard my wife whisper, "I don't feel anything anymore." I waited, then said, "Neither do I." The next morning, I canceled our anniversary plans and sent the trip money to my mom. She texted, "We can still talk, right?" As I left. I'm 31 and own a small auto garage in Houston. It isn't glamorous, but it's mine. I built it from an empty lot and a rusted sign. My wife Tasha is 28 and works in marketing for a trendy clothing brand downtown. She's all bright colors photo shoots and influencer events, a world of soft light and filters. We met 4 years ago when her old Toyota broke down outside my shop. She laughed at how serious I looked under the hood, said I had movie mechanic energy. I liked her spark, the way she spoke like everything was already part of a story worth telling. For a while we balanced each other out. I brought stability, she brought excitement. She'd show up at the shop with iced coffee and take photos of me pretending to work. I didn't mind being her content as long as she came home to me. But somewhere between promotions, sponsored trips, and her new creative team, she started fading into that world and leaving less of herself here. It began with little things. Her phone always flipped face down. Late replies. Work dinners that ended near midnight. She started smelling like perfume I hadn't bought. She laughed less around me, smiled more at her screen. When I asked if she was okay, she said she was just tired. I wanted to believe her. I told myself every couple goes through dull phases. But the silence between us began to feel permanent, like someone had turned off the volume in our house. Still, I tried. I planned our anniversary early that year, simple but thoughtful. I cleaned the house, cooked her favorite creamy pasta with shrimp, opened the bottle of wine she loved, and lit candles to make it feel like the nights we used to have when life was slower. She texted me at 6, saying she'd be late, a last-minute meeting, nothing unusual. By 8:30, I was just staring at the food going cold, scrolling through my phone, watching the time crawl. When she finally walked in around 9, I smiled, ready to hide the disappointment. She didn't even take off her coat. She looked beautiful, hair done, makeup fresh, not at all like someone who'd been in meetings all day. My heart dropped before she even spoke. She stood by the door like she didn't belong there anymore, her bag still on her shoulder, her eyes avoiding mine. Then she said it softly, almost kindly, that she didn't feel anything anymore. I froze. For a second, I thought she meant she felt numb about life in general. But then she added about us. The way she said us sounded like an old word she didn't recognize. I asked when that started. She shrugged, said it had been a while. She wasn't angry or sad, just detached. That calm scared me more than yelling would have. It meant she had already lived this moment in her head and rehearsed her escape. I tried a joke, asked if it was the pasta. She didn't laugh. She just kept standing there, fingers gripping her purse, strap, eyes glossy, but not with tears, more like guilt that had expired. I wanted to ask if there was someone else, but I already knew the answer. Weeks earlier, I had seen a man's name pop up on her phone, a photographer she had mentioned once or twice. She said he was just helping with brand shoots. I wanted to trust her, and for months, I convinced myself that love meant not checking her phone, not doubting her. Standing there in that kitchen, I realized love also means seeing what's right in front of you. The air felt heavy. My candles flickered like they knew they were useless now. She whispered something about not wanting to hurt me. I almost laughed because it was too late for that. I looked at the plates. I'd set the wine. I'd poured the music, still playing softly in the background. Every detail screamed effort. Every part of me felt small. She waited for me to speak. I didn't. I walked past her, opened the window, and blew out the candles one by one. The smell of smoke filled the room, faint but final. When I turned back, she was still there, but her eyes said goodbye long before her mouth did. I grabbed my jacket, stepped outside, and breathed in the night air. The city hummed like nothing had changed, but everything had. That sentence, those 6 words, split my life into before and after. And I stood there on the porch wondering how something that once felt so alive could end so quietly. I asked what she meant, and she shrugged like it was nothing serious. She said she didn't feel the spark anymore and wasn't sure if she ever truly did. The words hit me harder than I expected. The kitchen went quiet. The candles flickered weakly. The pasta steamed uselessly, and the soft jazz that I had played to set the mood now sounded like a cruel joke. I could hear my own breathing, slow and heavy, as if my body was trying to keep up with what my mind refused to process. I asked her if there was someone else. Her eyes darted to the floor before she nodded slightly. She said she had been reconnecting with someone from college. His name was Jordan, a freelance photographer who had just moved back to Houston. She said they had met for coffee a few times and that it just happened. I stared at her, trying to understand how betrayal could sound so casual, how she could make destruction sound like an accident. I asked if she loved him. She hesitated before saying she didn't know, which somehow hurt even more than if she had said yes. She wasn't even certain enough to choose. She said she had been confused for months and that pretending was exhausting. I told her she didn't need to pretend anymore. My voice didn't shake, though my hands did. I walked over to the stove, turned off the burner, and watched the sauce bubble one last time before dying out. I poured the wine into the sink and watched the red swirl down the drain like a quiet funeral. She stood there watching me, clutching her purse like she was ready to leave, but didn't know where to go. I told her the dinner wasn't for us anymore. Her lips trembled slightly, maybe from guilt, maybe from fear of losing the comfort she had mistaken for love. I went to the bedroom, pulled out a small bag, and packed a few clothes. She followed me down the hallway, her voice soft now, asking if I really had to leave tonight. I didn't answer right away. When I reached the front door, she whispered if I wanted to talk about it. I stopped and turned to her. There was nothing left to talk about. I told her she had already said everything, even in the silence. Every late text, every turned phone, every cold hug had been part of this conversation. She just didn't use words until now. For a second, I thought she would cry, but she didn't. She just stood there frozen as I opened the door. The night air hit my face, cool and clean, like freedom. I looked back one last time. She was still there in that dimly lit kitchen, surrounded by everything I had prepared to celebrate us. Now leftovers of something that had died quietly. I walked to my truck without anger, without shouting, without asking for explanations that would only make me hate her more. The drive to my brother's apartment took 20 minutes. I didn't turn on the radio or check my phone. The city lights blurred as I drove, but my thoughts were strangely clear. I realized that the man she had fallen out of love with was the same man she never truly knew. I had been the steady one, the patient one, the man who believed love could survive on effort alone. She had been chasing a story, not a person. And I had been the safety net she needed until someone more exciting came along. When I parked in front of my brother's building, I sat there for a while, staring at my reflection in the windshield. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like fixing anything. Some things weren't meant to be repaired. Some things needed a break, so you could finally see who you were without them. I stepped out of the truck and walked toward the door, leaving behind the life I had built around someone who had already left long before she said the words. The next week was chaos. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Tasha called, texted, left long voicemails that swung between guilt and anger. Some nights, she sounded broken, whispering that she had made a mistake. Other nights, she accused me of running away instead of fighting for us. I didn't reply to any of them. The silence was my answer. Then her mother showed up at my garage one afternoon, clutching her purse like it was a shield. She begged me to give her daughter another chance, said every marriage had storms. I told her this one had already sunk. That night, I sat at my desk and went through every shared account we had. I canceled the joint credit card, froze the savings, and redirected every business payment into my personal account. For the first time in years, my finances were mine again. As I checked the statements, I noticed charges that didn't make sense. Hotel bookings, expensive meals, weekend transactions in Galveston and Miami labeled as work trips. Suddenly, all those times she said she was on a brand retreat looked different. I felt disgusted, but not surprised. Betrayal always leaves a paper trail. The next morning, I gathered everything she'd left behind in the house. Clothes, perfumes, framed photos, little decorations she had insisted we buy. I boxed them neatly and dropped them off at her mother's doorstep. When her mom opened the door, she didn't say a word. She just nodded and closed it softly. I went back to my garage and decided it was time for change. I sold the couch she picked, the TV she wanted, even the rug she said made the place feel cozy. I used the money to repaint the shop, install better lights, and replace the old sign. My crew teased me, saying heartbreak had turned me into a workaholic. Maybe they were right. Every stroke of paint felt like cleaning out a wound. Days turned into weeks. She kept trying to reach me, but I never responded. The silence became my therapy. I focused on rebuilding, not for revenge, but for recovery. One afternoon, a local influencer came in with her car. She filmed a video about how honest and professional we were. Within a week, that video blew up online. People started showing up from all over the city just because they wanted to support a garage that didn't lie. Business tripled in a month. I hired 2 more mechanics and bought new tools. Around that same time, I heard rumors that Tasha's company had fired her. Someone said she got caught using the corporate card for fake client dinners that didn't exist. I didn't celebrate, but part of me felt a cold sense of balance. Life had its own way of keeping score. A few weeks later, she sent one final message. It was a long paragraph about how lonely she felt, how Jordan had turned out to be different for what she expected. She said she missed the safety of what we had. I read it once, then deleted it without replying. Sometimes silence speaks louder than any words of closure. I spent that weekend finishing a mural I had started on the side of the shop. It showed a pair of hands rebuilding an old engine under sunlight. A customer said it looked like hope. I guess that's what I was painting all along. In the evenings, I started going for runs again. I reconnected with old friends, people I hadn't seen in years because I was too busy trying to keep someone else happy. One night, I went out with my brother and his wife. We laughed about old times until midnight. For the first time in months, I didn't think about her once. A few months after that, I bought a dog. A small brown mutt that followed me around the shop. I named him Diesel. Every time I looked at him sleeping under the car lifts, I remembered how quiet peace could feel when you stopped chasing noise. My payback wasn't loud or public. I didn't post cryptic quotes online or try to prove I had won. I just lived better. Every client who left my shop satisfied, every paycheck I earned, every quiet evening I spent without tension became my revenge. By the end of that year, my life looked nothing like it did when she left. The business was thriving, my home was mine again, and the silence that once felt like emptiness had turned into freedom. I didn't need her apology. I didn't need anyone's pity. My revenge had already taken shape long before she realized it. It was success. And more than that, it was peace. 6 months later, I had moved into a small house on the edge of the city, surrounded by quiet roads and tall trees. It wasn't fancy, but it felt like home. The first thing I bought was a wooden workbench for the garage. I planted a small garden behind the house and built a fence by hand. Every morning, I'd wake up before sunrise, make coffee, and sit on the porch watching the mist rise off the grass. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt like peace. I adopted a dog from the shelter, a mixed breed with curious eyes and a limp tail that never stopped wagging. I named him Diesel. He followed me everywhere from the workshop to the grocery store. Having him around filled the quiet moments that used to make me think too much. The house smelled like oil and sawdust again, just the way I liked it. My brother visited, often bringing his kids to help with small car projects. They ran around the yard laughing while Diesel chased after them. The laughter reminded me that family didn't have to be perfect to be whole. I started volunteering at the local high school, twice a week teaching kids basic auto repair. Some of them came from rough neighborhoods. They reminded me of myself at 17, searching for purpose, but afraid to say it out loud. Watching them learn how to rebuild an engine taught me something too. Fixing things only works when both sides want them fixed. It wasn't just about cars. It was about people. You can't rebuild someone who has already decided to walk away. Business at my garage had never been better. The viral video still brought new customers every week. I hired 2 apprentices for my mentoring class and paid them fairly because I remembered how it felt to be underestimated. My days were full, but never rushed. Every bolt I turned felt like proof that I could rebuild my life without needing anyone's permission. One afternoon, while closing the shop, I checked my phone and saw her name on the screen for the first time in months. It was just one text. "Do you ever miss me?" I stared at it for a while, not because I didn't know the answer, but because I wanted to feel nothing when I gave it. I typed no, but I hope you find what you couldn't feel. Then I locked my phone and put it face down on the counter. There was no satisfaction, just calm. That night, I worked late on a '67 Mustang that had been sitting in the corner of my shop for months. The car was old, worn down, and full of problems, but I loved every part of it. The restoration was slow and demanding the kind of job that rewarded patience, not begging. I sanded the frame, while Diesel slept beside me snoring softly. The sound of tools echoed through the space, steady and rhythmic like a heartbeat returning to normal. As I wiped the dust from the metal, I thought about how strange life can be. A year ago, I was cooking dinner for someone who couldn't even look at me without pretending. Now I was standing in a garage filled with light and the smell of paint, planning a future that didn't include anyone else's approval. Sometimes you lose everything just to remember what peace sounds like. I didn't hate her anymore. Hate takes energy, and I had better things to build. Maybe she found someone else, maybe she didn't. It wasn't my concern. The chapter had closed without bitterness or noise. What I once called heartbreak had turned into clarity. I realized that letting go isn't an act of weakness. It's proof that you're strong enough to stop trying to fix someone who was never broken for you in the first place. A few weeks later, I took Diesel on a drive through the back roads at sunset. The sky burned orange and gold above the horizon. The wind smelled like freedom and gasoline. As the engine roared beneath my hands, I smiled. Every mile between me and the city felt like distance between who I was and who I had become. It turns out when someone says they don't feel anything anymore, it isn't your job to make them feel again. It's your chance to start feeling your own life for the first time. And in that quiet golden hour with my hands on the wheel and my dog in the seat beside me, I realized I had finally done exactly that. I had learned to breathe again. I had learned to live.